Hello all my crafty people, and welcome back to another machine embroidery video. Today we're going to be going over stabilizers. One of the probably the most important part of any machine embroidery project is your stabilizer. And that's because stabilizer is what it sounds like. It stabilizes your fabric. And so there are all different types of stabilizer on the market for all the different types of fabric that you're going to want to embroider on. Now again, this is specifically for machine embroidery. Hand embroidery is its own world. So yeah, and then today in this video I'm not going to be hooping anything just because that is very specific. And so this is just going to be a really great general overview for you if you're just getting started in machine embroidery and you're wondering what type of stabilizer you need to have to kind of get going. All right, so the first type of stabilizer, this is our most basic, our most generic. This is called Tearaway stabilizer. And you're gonna notice it's kind of a papery material, papery slash fabrics type of material. It almost feels like paper money, American paper money specifically. And it's really easy to identify Tearaway because you can literally tear it very easily. This is our most common stabilizer because it's lightweight, it's easy to use, and it's easy to remove, right? Because we can tear it away. It does make it easier for most machine embroidery projects that people get started with. Now, the type of fabric you're going to want to use with a tearaway stabilizer is going to be a woven fabric. A woven fabric is anything that is woven, usually on a loom. So any cotton fabric, denim, linens, even rayons are considered a woven fabric. One of the easiest ways to tell it's a woven is that you have something called the selvage on either end. And then I wanted to show you this piece of fabric because you can really see it really well. I can adjust this a little bit better. So you can see how you have horizontal and vertical lines. That's horizontal and vertical lines of fibers or threads, creating a woven material. So there's definitely different types of wovens, obviously. For most quilting cottons, for muslin, even for linens, a tearaway stabilizer on the back of your woven fabric is going to be more than enough to stabilize the fabric in the hoop. And obviously the reason why we stabilize our fabric in the hoop is because it's literally just sitting under a needle that's going in and out of it thousands of times. You know, depending on the design that you've chosen, it could be tens of thousands, even 100,000 times. And so obviously if you have just a piece of metal going in and out of this piece of fabric, that area in which you're embroidering in is going to get warped. It's going to stress it out. It's going to make it pucker. It's going to do all kinds of things to your fabric. So you want to have a good stabilizer, the right stabilizer behind your fabric to support it properly. Tearaway is a great basic one to start with. You're always going to need a tearaway at some point or another. Tearaway can be used in the hoop with the fabric with your project. It can also be used with other stabilizers and fabrics as what's called a floater piece of stabilizer. And that would be like if you just had a piece of the tearaway underneath the hoop, not inside of it, not hooped into it. And it just floats underneath, and it always gives you that little extra support without, you know, maybe adding too much to it. And so that's why I always recommend anybody who buys an embroidery machine, the first type of stabilizer you should get should just be tearaway. It is going to be the least expensive too, and a roll will last you a good long time. And then what I would say is, you know, get a piece of, I wouldn't do muslin just because, I mean, you could start off with muslin if you really want to go super cheap with your fabric because it's usually like $2.99 a yard, or just a piece of like quilter's cotton fabric. You know, even old jeans or something like that, like some, you know, thinner, not as thick denim jeans would work really well too. Now with most tearaway, it's usually just plain like this. You lay it out, you lay your fabric on top, and then you put it in your embroidery hoop. Now sometimes you have materials that are going to be, you don't want to put in the hoop itself because it's going to stress it out, it's going to warp it like that. And so they also make something called a sticky tearaway. So this particular one is a paper backed tearaway. So on this side you can feel it has that fabric, paper material, you know, fiber on it. And then on this side it's paper that you just peel off. And so what you would do with something like this is you would hoop it in your embroidery hoop with the paper side up. And then all you have to do is take like a pin and you would score the paper, you know, and then just peel off the square or whatever area you need to stick your material on. A sticky back tearaway is really great for, say you have a lighter weight cotton fabric, like this is a cotton fabric, so this is a double gauze. So it's very thin. You can see it's see-through. It's very thin, fine fabric. And I may not want to hoop this just because it would shift so much during the hooping process. So being able to just, you know, cut out a square, stick this on, and then embroider it is going to make it much easier for you. You can also use a sticky back tearaway for, you know, like a tea towel. That's a good project, or something that's already sewn together. So say you have like a baby onesie that someone gave you for a baby shower and you want to be able to add some embroidery embellishment, but it's already sewn together. It's, you know, instead of having to take it apart, it's going to be a lot easier to just find the area you want and stick it down right there for you. So we have a regular tearaway with no stickiness, and then you have like a paperback tearaway, and then you also have tearaways that have like a glue, or a water activated glue. So instead of being paper backed, you would wet it with a sponge that would make it sticky, and then you would stick your project onto it like that. Now in general, a tearaway, you're going to tear it away from the fabric once your embroidery is stitched out. It's not something you would, it's for projects you don't want the stabilizer to stay in there. You don't want to feel it afterwards. It does have a more rough feel to it, so ideally you want to take it off of the project after you're done. Now we also have, the next stabilizer that we have is going to be a Cutaway. Now this is going to be a softer feeling version of the Tearaway. It's going to have more of a fabric-y type feel to it. And the difference is it's going to be thicker. And you're going to see I can try and tear it, but it's not going to tear. So a Cutaway is obviously a more stable, a more stiff stabilizer. And it's really good for something that is a more delicate type of fabric. So a woven fabric has probably like a medium structure to it. Something like a knit is going to be very loose, is not going to have a lot of structure to it, because knits they're created differently, right? They're made with knitting needles, and so they have a looser, more flowy structure to them in general. And then the way that they're created means that they're not structurally sound. And that makes sense, because when you wear a knit dress, you want it flowy and soft, and it has a lot of drapage to it. And so something like a knit, especially a knit that you're going to wear, you're going to want to have something a little bit stiffer back behind it. So here I am just holding the knit, and then here it is on top of a piece of Cutaway. And you can see it gives it a lot more structure. So a Cutaway is going to be stiffer, and so it's just going to be for thinner fabrics or fabrics you want to have a little bit more structure to it. Now this is definitely going to be a little bit more difficult to use. Not maybe difficult to use, but once you've embroidered something on your project, you are going to have to come in and cut away the bulk of the stabilizer, bulk of the Cutaway. And so that's when you get into the different types of scissors and things like that when it comes to machine embroidery. I'm not going to get into that in this video because there's literally at least a dozen different types of scissors that you can use with machine embroidery. Just know that if you have a project, you have something stitched out on here, and then when you come to the back, you want to be able to cut away without cutting into your fabric and things like that. So Tearaway is going to be your first level of stabilizer. Cutaway is going to be your second level of stabilizer, a little bit thicker in that regard. And then, so those are your two main backings. The third one is going to be something called a Noshow Mesh. This is also ideal for knit fabrics. This is really great for t-shirts and baby clothes because it's a nice soft mesh material. So it feels nice and soft against the skin, but you can see it has a nice woven structure to it. So it's going to give yourself a lot of stability. And then with the Noshow Mesh, there are different types of it as well. There are, you know, sticky meshes. There are paper-backed mesh. There are, the best ones are probably the fusible. So meaning that on one side there's like a glue that's activated by an iron. So you would iron it to the back of the fabric, and then it would just fuse on there, making it really easy to work with. Now, a no-show mesh is ideal for a project that you want to leave the stabilizer in there, so that way it doesn't look too odd on the fabric. Again, this is really great for garments like t-shirts, baby clothes, hats, like bucket hats, and things like that. Okay, so those are like the main ones for the backing. Now, let's see what else there is. Now, a specialty one that there is, it's gonna look very similar to the no-show mesh, but it is different. It's hard. So that's the no-show mesh. And then this is what we call a water-soluble stabilizer. This is really ideal for what's called freestanding lace, which I do have an example of. Okay, so this is an example of freestanding lace, and you can actually see the water-soluble stabilizer still in there. And so what's going to happen is, because this is a water-soluble material, once you wash it in warm water, it just kind of disappears, and then all you're left with is the thread. So this is just all embroidery thread on the front and in the back. And so then when you wash away that stabilizer, you're left with just thread. And I love doing freestanding lace for Christmas ornaments. You can also do like table decorations. But really, I think that's the main uses that I've seen for freestanding lace, is just like pretty little holiday decorations. I'm sure there's other uses for them. So this is definitely more of a specialty stabilizer. For this kind of project. You can also use it for 3D applique, which I've never done myself, but I'm gonna guess it works pretty much similar to how the freestanding lace does. So that is another specialty stabilizer. What's nice about this too is you can just hoop it in the hoop. If you need to do a couple layers, like this particular one, I did two layers of it. But it's not a very stitch heavy design. There's not a whole lot of layering of thread in there. So yeah, that's a water soluble stabilizer. This is definitely not one I would start with if you're just getting into machine embroidery. This might, unless you know that's the first thing you want to do is make freestanding lace Christmas ornaments or like butterflies or something like that. Then this might be something you can hold off on for a little while. Okay, and then going off of the water-soluble type of stabilizer. So this is not, I guess it's still called a stabilizer, but this is what's considered a topper. A topper is, you can see it's a plasticky kind of material. And what this is really used for is for any kind of fabric that has what's called a nap or a pile. So something like minky, So see how it has these fibers. Bath towels. Bath towels is a really popular one. So what happens, you know, so something like this, I would have sticky stabilizer, sticky tearaway in the hoop. I would stick whatever area I'm embroidering onto the sticky area or onto the sticky stabilizer. And then what you're going to do is on top, you put your plastic topper. And what that does is it just holds all the fibers down so that as the needle and as the fabric is moving underneath the needle doesn't get caught up in the fibers. The fibers don't pill quite as much and get on your thread, causing your thread to break. And then the last thing it does is it allows the embroidery threads to sit really beautifully on top of those fibers, so that once you wash this away, all you're left with is just the embroidery thread or the embroidery design laying flat and beautifully on top of your fabric. And so topper would be one I would say you definitely want to get probably towards the beginning of your embroidery, because somebody's going to ask you to do their beach towels or their bath towels. You're going to want to do your bath towels. It's a lot of fun to be able to add your name. Of course, you could do things like his and hers. I made some for my sister for her new house that said Queen Bee on them. And so that was a lot of fun. Now, so not only can you use the topper for something like minky or, you know, bath towels. What is that called? Terry cloth? Thank you. Thank you to myself, yes. But you can also use it for something maybe is not quite as exaggerated, like this is a flannel. And again, I just want to having this on top was going to make my stitching just lay all that much better. I also really like to use topper on knit fabrics. Yes, I put it right on top of my knit, because the stitches have a tendency to sink into the fibers, especially on a knit. If you think about it, they're hooked like this as opposed to woven. And so any thread you put on top of it wants to kind of sink in there. And so just having a nice little piece of topper on top is going to ensure that your design comes out really nice. Now this is a water soluble topper. It's really easy to remove once you're done, even if you just like kind of rip it a little bit or trim it down and then wash it. You can also use a heat activated topper. So this would be one that you apply heat from an iron with it, and then it'll just kind of like shrink away. I'm hesitant to use a plastic that requires me to iron it. Just because I know things would go wrong, but there are people who prefer to have the heat. Maybe it's some kind of fabric you don't want to wash. You're afraid that it would get ruined in the washing machine, or you don't want to hand wash it. So there are heat away toppers as well. And it's the same kind of thing. It's a plasticky material, and you would just lay it on top of any fabric that has that nap or pile to it. All right, and then a couple of more specialty ones. You have something called, this is like a foam. And you can use this as a stabilizer in a project. I would probably hoop the sticky back stabilizer and then stick this and then use this kind of like floating. This is really, most people end up using this for applique projects. So if you want your applique to like poof out. And they use this also in like baseball hats. So if you have like if you have a team baseball hat and the letter is raised, this is what's underneath it to kind of give it that poofy 3D effect. So that's a specialty one. It's foam that you can find out on the market. You would just need to make sure that your embroidery machine can handle something like this stabilizer. But definitely not something you're probably not going to start with right off the bat. Not super common. And then another one that I had found was this fabric magic. This helps. So what you do is when you apply this, this is going to shrink and then I think you iron it or you wash it, and then it like shrinks and causes like a crinkly distortion to your project. And this is definitely more, it almost feels like a liner fabric. It's really silky smooth, has that feel to it. I tried to think of a reason to use this stabilizer or what kind of project I would use it in, and I really couldn't think of anything. So if you can think of something of where you would use a fabric magic that shrinks something, let me know down in the comments. I have no idea. But that is pretty much all the major types of stabilizer and toppers that are out there. I would say if you're just getting started in machine embroidery, you can start with probably a tearaway and a topper, maybe like a sticky tearaway and a topper, and that's going to be more than enough for you to kind of practice, get going on a lot of different types of projects without having to spend too much money from the get-go. And then you can kind of build up your stash of stabilizer from there. So if you want to see more machine embroidery videos, I am going to be doing a series on how do I hoop that, where I take different types of fabric and show you how I would hoop it up, what toppers I might use, if I'm going to use a floater, and things like that. So make sure that you like this video and subscribe to my channel for more machine embroidery and beginner sewing projects. Thank you all so much and have a crafty day.